So today I'm going to talk about how to optimize your game retention with data-driven analytics. And of course, firstly, let's start with a few words about AppsFlyer. We are the leading mobile advertising analytics platform in the market. In terms of leading, firstly, we're leading in Asia. We're currently have offices in 2 locations, and we're expanding rapidly into 4 more around the region, including Singapore. So hopefully we'll have somebody presence here very soon. I think the other thing that is probably more important to note is leading in scale and retention. So like AppsFlyer, we are an unbiased attribution platform, and we're the attribution authority. But by the same way that we judge and audit mobile advertising, we're also judged by our peers within the industry. A report was published about 4 or 5 weeks ago by 3 independent companies, MixRank, Apptopia, and SourceDNA. And interestingly, they came to similar conclusions. The first conclusion was that slightly over 5% of the apps out there that have a tracking solution installed have AppsFlyer in it. So when it comes to mass adoption across the industry, you can see that AppsFlyer is leading the way in terms of tracking solutions. But more importantly, and this is the takeaway that you should have today, is that we're leading in retention. Currently, we have about 85% customer retention. So it's very, very important to know that retention is the key to growth. And if you want to grow, you need to focus on your customers. And hopefully this presentation today will help you to understand a little bit more about how to optimize your game with retention. And of course, I'll be focusing more on the network side. And well, for those of you who are here for the Facebook presentation, it might look like a Facebook presentation part 2, but it wasn't planned. So let's go back to the basics. So I'm sure you all have played Candy Crush at some point. And this is to serve as a tutorial about what mobile advertising analytics is. So as a platform, we help you to measure your user acquisition funnel across the whole mobile ecosystem. It doesn't matter whether it's social, whether it's video, whether it's through an affiliate network, whether it's from QR code, or even from TV. We help you to know where your users are coming from, what those users are doing so that you can measure LTVs, and of course, optimize your campaigns based on ROI and your goals so that you can achieve the best results. And in order to do that, you need a platform in there that's able to measure across the whole ecosystem, an all-in-one solution. And that's where AppsFlyer comes in. So we are going to be releasing a report in the coming days, and this is AppsFlyer's first performance index. The performance index basically covers mobile gaming, and when we talk about mobile gaming, there will be a lot of deep insights in there. Today I'm going to preview some of those insights and findings that we are going to publish, and hopefully, you know, when this report comes out, if anyone's interested, you can go to our website, but or also ask me, and I'll help to make sure that you get a copy of that. So let's start with the Big Apple, okay? iOS. Here we're looking at retention across a range of networks, and these are the top 15 networks in the industry that we identified, and we look at retention. Here, in this case, averaged out over 3 critical measurement points. D1, which is day 1, day 7, and day 30. When you're looking here at retention, you see that platforms, for example, like AppLovin is leading the way when it comes to mobile retention throughout. But then you also see platforms like Vungle and, of course, Facebook continue to go strong in retention. And then our report will also show that Playhaven while the initial retention might be lower, the long-term retention coming to day 30 actually starts to perform really well. So it means that they have very good user quality. It should be no surprise to you that video is also dominating. We wanted to take a look here specifically at iOS once again from an ad format point of view. And here you can see that video is trumping social, video is trumping in-app, and video is definitely trumping non-video when it comes to retention for games. So I think the key takeaway from this slide is video is kicking ass. Here we looked at in-app versus affiliate traffic, and there's no contest when it comes to iOS. Retention of in-app is 3 times higher than affiliates. So if you want to be targeting better retention on iOS, you should stay with the better networks and ad formats that will drive you a much better long-term value. But of course, affiliates and incentive does have its role in the industry. Here we're looking at Android, okay? Once again, we're looking here, we've just taken the top 15 retention networks, and here we see that AdColony, Amplifier, and Vungle, 3 video networks, once again are dominating on the Android ecosystem. And of course, it should not be a surprise that Facebook is also leading the charge here. But when we take a look at Android and incentivized versus affiliate, it's interesting to see that affiliates are actually performing significantly better than incentivized platforms. This isn't to say that incentivized platforms don't have their role in the ecosystem, but once again, if you're looking at longer-term value and longer-term retention, then affiliate is trumping incentivized networks. Okay, are you guys ready for a surprise? No surprise here. Video is kicking ass on Android as well. Here we see video has about 24% greater retention than social, and around between in-app and affiliate, it's around 65% between both. So again, the key takeaway here is that video across both platforms is delivering the best retention for mobile gaming. So let's look now at Android versus iOS on a head-to-head basis. What do you guys think is going to happen? That's right, iOS is kicking again. Okay, so when you look at retention on iOS, day 1 you have about 8% better retention, but once you're in day 30, you're seeing around 70% better retention on iOS compared to Android. So this is very important to note that I think most of you find it challenging to acquire users on iOS. But the takeaway here, and this is from my own experience, it's much more difficult to get a Apple user or iPhone user to install your app, because they're more advanced users. They've probably had 4, 5, 6 smartphones by now, compared to Android users who are trigger happy when it comes to installing stuff. So it's much more difficult to get an iOS user, but as you can see from here, the value will outweigh the cost of acquiring them. So here we have the iOS domination broken down. Once again, you see that video is leading, and then once again, iOS is leading in when it comes to social networks. But it's not all doom and gloom for Android, of course, because Android tends to shine in 2 specific categories here when we're looking at retention specifically, in affiliate and incentivized networks. What's interesting here is that we see on a short-term basis, Android retention can be much better. But once you start drawing it out and you go into day 30 and beyond, iOS users will start to take over. Okay, you ready with your cameras? Here's the power ranking index for gaming. Okay, we've taken the top 25 networks across the industry and we've ranked them. Okay, the power ranking is based on two specific criteria. One is quantity, which is basically the number of installs that a network can drive, and compared it to quality, which is weighed out over three specific criteria, one being retention, the second being LTV, and the third in terms of engagement. So Facebook is leading here when it comes to iOS, with platforms like Chartboost and AppLovin, which is AppLovin is a new entrant into our performance index. They weren't here in Q4 when we last published this. And of course, Google and Twitter has actually made a strong entry into, started to move up in the power ranking. And then of course, new platforms like NativeX, which have launched a video product, and I think that they've seen something like 700% growth in the past quarter. And then rounding it off is mail.ru, which is a very strong platform specifically in the Russian region. The Android power ranking, some similar faces here. You see Facebook and Chartboost both leading the charge here. But the interesting thing to note is we also start to see some Chinese-grown networks, for example, Mobvista and Cheetah Mobile, which have made it into the power ranking. And then, of course, some new entrants like HeyZap and IronSource, who round off the power ranking for Android. So this is also an interesting takeaway here, so that you can, I mean, the purpose of providing this is that when you launch a game, you want to go to the top networks first. You want to make sure that you're hitting them and then start going across the ecosystem and using the learning that you've got to go and deliver much better campaigns. So the key takeaways from this part is that, number one, big data is king. So the more data that is available, the better the targeting and the better the user quality. Second, video is perfect for mobile, and that should not be a surprise. And third, Facebook is power. So if you want to drive a high volume, high quality campaign, it's probably going to be your go-to source. But in AppsFlyer, we have over 1,000 other platforms that you can choose from. So one of my recommendations here, or maybe this is probably industry-wide, is that if you can't get your retention right, you need to stop. And you need to think about it, what you're doing, and how to improve that. Because retention is the key to growth. So most of my presentations, I like to give candy towards the end of the presentations. And this is what I call, I want to share some best practices that we've learned across the industry and asked our, and that our advertisers were able to share with us, so that you as developers and publishers know how to optimize your games so that you start to achieve much better results on mobile. The first tip is easy come, easy go. All right, we know that it takes about a minute to install to download and install an app on your device, and about 5 seconds to delete it. So you need to first pay attention to some of the key industry benchmarks. And when we're looking at retention, these are, let's call them industry averages, okay? You need to do better than this and outperform these numbers in order to know that you're doing the right thing. So on day one, we see around 30% retention or higher. Day 7, 15%, and day 30, 7%. So this is, again, you know, you got to focus first on day one. I think it's very important that if you don't have users staying around, then your chance of monetizing is going to be very low. The second tip that I'd like to provide is about notifications, okay? You need to use notifications, but you need to treat players differently. New players, when they onboard in your game, you sometimes need to reach out a hand to them to help them. For example, you know, give them some free coins or free credit so that if they experience a little bit of difficulty getting past the first, second, or third level, that at least you're able to take them across. But with regards to hardcore gamers, they have different needs than the new guys. So hardcore gamers, sometimes you might need to offer them the chance to get a golden sword or 5 diamonds or something like that so that they can pass the next level. And then we have the third category, which we call champions. So you've acquired a user, they've been a newbie, they've been a hardcore, and now they've completed the game. So with these guys, you want to let them know when you've released 15 new levels, you want to send them a notification. The third tip is build a community. We found that users retain much longer when they have peers or friends that are part of the game. So social logins are very important. In this case, using a Facebook, Twitter, or Google login will definitely help you to build a more community sense. The key to having communities, and the key to my takeaway here is that in order to increase retention, you need to also increase virality. And in order to, through communities, you have that virality effect. When you have more virality of your app, it means that you're able to increase your LTVs. That means the longer users are going to be staying within your game much longer. And when they're staying within your game much longer, it means you're making money. And when you're making money, it gives you the ability to afford much higher CPIs, as someone asked earlier, because you want to buy into better audiences. So this is a cycle that you need to look at very clearly within your game and see how to optimize better. The fourth tip here is releasing updates. You have to know your market and you have to know your customers. So I heard somebody recently in a presentation about Korea. Korea is very unique. Users there want to have, it's common to release a minor update every 2 weeks, a major update every 4 weeks, and a complete new build once every 2 months. But if you try that in markets, for example, like the US, you'll see that your users might leave very quickly. So you need to be very sensitive to the market, and you need to know how to measure it and make sure that what you're doing is customized to the market and, as we call, culturalized. And finally, the last tip of the day is reviews and ratings. So you need to read the feedback. It matters. Some data shows that a game with a 4-star rating can have up to a 4% higher retention than a game that has a 3-star rating. Now imagine each percentage point is critical when it comes to gaming retention. So if you don't pay attention to your customers and your gamers, they are not going to pay attention to you, and they will leave. Thank you.
So I saw a talk at Casual Connect last year, actually, from Larilyn McWilliams. You touched upon this in your last point, actually, where she kind of issued a warning that retention doesn't necessarily correspond to player happiness, basically. You were talking a bit about reviews there. I mean, is there a danger that you can just see the fact that players stay in your game a little bit longer as being exactly the same thing as them being satisfied with your game?
Well, I think that, I mean, if you look at reviews, actually good or bad reviews can benefit one way or another. We see that sometimes, and I was reading recently that games with 3-star reviews actually have some amazing retention. It's because the users are so engaged in the game and they're complaining about it, they're actually begging for you to help them and begging for you to do something to actually improve the experience. So I think that, you know, when you look at reviews as a whole, I mean, you have to understand the context of where people are coming from, and getting a bad review may not be the worst thing, but it sure will not hurt you to get a better review.
And also, I mean, you talked about iOS versus Android retention rates, and obviously iOS is kicking butt in that regard. But does that vary across different regions, different countries, or is that pretty consistent where both platforms are present?
I think we're seeing this basically across the whole ecosystem. You know, it's no surprise that there's so many new Android users coming into the market every day. I mean, if you look at, you know, markets, for example, like I think India, there's around 8 million new Android users every month. I mean, these are people that for the first time in their life, they have a computer in their hand. They've never had any engagement with data, never any engagement on a desktop, on a PC, anything. So these people don't, I mean, you're talking like freshies, you know, right out of the gate, their first device. So it's very, we see that, you know, on the flip side, you look at iOS and you see the users are much more mature and they're more discerning, if you will. So we don't have, and I recently became an iOS user as well, you know, we don't have the patience to have 57 apps on our phone and play them at the same time. We have the attention span for, you know, 2 or maybe 3 games. So we're going to be very selective about what we use, and when we use it, we tend to display much more loyalty.
So you're going to get your 25 grand a year Clash of Clans user on the iOS platform as opposed to Android, more than likely.
Yeah, well, it's no surprise that guy had an iPhone 6 Plus.
Quite